Police, man. The girl got stabbed on the train.
Someone got stabbed on the train? Give me 1 second.
Yeah. I think she's dead, man. I think the girl might be dead, man.
So this is what frustrates me. Everything is political. Truth is political. Life is political. Freedom is political. Church being open is political. And if you read the story of Elijah, every day it's a head-on collision between the prophet and the government.
I want all people to come to Christ.
You want all people to come to Christ? Yes. Even my Jewish family members. You want us to come to Christ?
Yes, I hope you accept Yeshua as the Lord and Savior, because Christ is King.
Kiss the sun, kiss the sun. Only a fool would fight against the champion. You better bow, or you better run.
Today we're going to discuss the brouhaha between Joel Webbon and Doug Wilson and his associated organizations. And we're going to discuss Christian masculinity and an interesting poll that I have up on my Twitter feed. We won't spend much time on that because the poll is not yet closed. And also I covered a lot of that in one of my previous podcasts. But I do want to at least touch on it quickly because the results are instructive and they are basically what we would expect to see. So, without further ado, let's get into it. I'm Gabriel Huddleston, and this is Where the Battle Runs Thick. So, first, let's just briefly cover the poll that I put up on my Twitter account. I brought up the scenario that I covered in my recent episode about courage. The whole, you're at a restaurant and some random stranger makes a sexual comment, slaps your wife's backside. What are you supposed to do? What's the Christian manly response? And how, for a long time, my view was, okay, you know, if he's not actually going to, like, hurt her in some way, he's not trying to kidnap her or stab her or something, then you should just de-escalate and leave. Don't risk the physical and legal consequences that could arise from intervening. But I no longer hold that view. I think it's very telling of the way that we have been feminized in our culture today, that we think of this question, but not just this question, so many questions. The only way that we can visualize godly Christian behavior is spiritual. It's just by talking, or by praying, or by somehow arguing, convincing, debating. We do not have a concept for actual physical action in the face of evil. We think, okay, yeah, there's certainly some theoretical point at which something would be bad enough that you would then need to act. But how did we get here? How did we get to where the possibility of throwing a righteous right hook is just kind of off the table? We've been so consistently taught that no, you never want to start a fight, you never want to pick a fight, you know, force is always a very, very, very last resort, which of course, like lethal force, that is a last resort. But the idea that we're only allowed to communicate in words, okay, is, let's use a biblical example here. That's similar to saying that Jesus could have cleared out the temple with words, right? He could have gone in there and picketed. He could have stood up on a corner and said, hey, it is written that this is supposed to be a house of prayer, but you've turned it into a robber's den. That's how we would think it was appropriate for Jesus to do what he did. That is how, that is the most courageous way that we can fathom a Christian man doing something like that today. The idea of taking a whip and chasing people out, we don't have a category for that. We have been so discipled in the be nice theology that we're really in trouble as a society, as men. And it's very interesting because the poll results have proven to be rather predictable. So I broke the poll down, and the question was, I described the scenario and then asked the question, what should the husband do? Should he, and then I had 4 options. It's really just 2 options, and then the person voting in the poll is supposed to identify whether they're male or female. So it's punch or leave. So option 1 is punch, and in parentheses, I'm a man. Leave, in parentheses, I'm a man. And then option 3 and 4 are punch, I'm a woman, and leave, I'm a woman. So that way we could get results, just the 2 options, and I know it's oversimplified. There's a bunch of different nuances, and, well, do you punch, or do you yell at him, or do you call the police? I get it. My point is, should you physically confront the guy, or should you try to de-escalate and get away from the situation? And then I wanted to see how the votes came in based on whether the voters were male or female. And the results were pretty predictable. The overwhelming majority of men said that the right response would be to punch the guy. And a significant majority of women said that the right response would be to leave. And I really got a kick out of this because, number 1, it's what we would expect. Number 2, it's a perfect illustration of why this conversation is so important. When we talk about, for example, God's design for men to be the leaders in the civil sphere, this would be an example of why. Because men are better programmed to be protectors. They're programmed that way by God. The correct response, given those 2 options, punch or leave, the correct response is punch. You should punch the guy. And we need to get a lot more comfortable saying that. We need to be teaching our sons, hey, here are actually the correct times for you to use manly violence in defense of the innocent and in thwarting the plans of bad guys. Bad guys should not be comfortable around Christian men. They should be a little scared. Of course, not if they're coming in repentance or in humility, but if they were planning to do evil, then they should be scared. So let's play the scenario out a little bit. This guy, assaults your wife. It's a mild form of sexual assault. And you respond with like a de-escalate. Maybe you verbalize your anger. Like you chew him out a little bit, and then you take your wife and leave. Okay, well, he won. Because he got to have his fun. He was not concerned about making you upset. He was well aware that it would upset you and her. That's part of the whole point. That's part of why somebody would do something like that, is to get a reaction. So he won. He's encouraged. He's more likely to do it again the next time. He didn't get any real consequences. He just got chewed out. Okay, another option, what? Maybe you call the police? Okay, you could do that. You could press charges. And I'm not saying that charges necessarily wouldn't be deserved, but we have such an impulse in our culture to push responsibility off to somebody else. I'm not going to deal with the situation. I want somebody with a badge or a degree, some expert, somebody to get involved and they deal with the situation. Instead of saying, no, look, I'm a man and I'm going to take responsibility for the situation that I'm in. Especially when that comes to protecting my family. No, instead I want to pass the buck, have the police deal with it. That way I don't get sued. Because, to be fair, our culture really is set up in a way to punish manly courage, acts of courage, where you get involved, there's a good chance you're going to get sued. But, at the end of the day, we're called to do what is right, regardless of the consequences. Now, we should be clear, too, when we talk about punching the guy, I absolutely believe in measured responses, right? This doesn't justify his rude action does not justify a full UFC takedown, ground and pound, knock out all his teeth, and leave him bloody and unconscious on the floor. I'm not talking about that. But I am talking about a stiff enough response that you demonstrate, I'm not scared of you. What you did was unacceptable, and you deserve a good bloody nose for it. And that's just completely appropriate, and that's standing up for what is right. We need Christian men to do that more. America would be a different country if it was full of men who didn't just roll over. The trend lately of, based on the videos I've seen, it seems like it's young black men specifically, but of young men riding their bikes on a wheelie through crowded areas, riding right up close to someone to where they almost make impact with random pedestrians, and then just at the very last second turning away and not actually hitting them. And doing this again and again and again. That trend would not get anywhere in a country with courageous men. A country with men who were less afraid of being sued and more afraid of being a coward. A country full of men who feared God and not others. A country full of the kind of men who would knock somebody like that over. No, you can't endanger all the people in this crowded, busy thoroughfare. Not on my watch. And you knock the guy over. And that's what should be happening. And we know this on a fundamental level, and the people on Twitter will all say this, but then when it comes down to it, when it comes down to the wire, we're too busy counting the cost to actually pay the price of heroism and courage. And that should not be Christian men. Christian men should get in the way of the wicked. Like a trampled spring and a polluted well is a righteous man who does not give way, or is a righteous man who gives way before the wicked. The wicked flee when no one is pursuing, but the righteous is as bold as a lion. Now tell me, does bold as a lion look like, well, I might get sued, well, I might get hurt, well, I might get in trouble? Or does bold as a lion look like, no, this is what is right, and I'm going to stand on what is right? We need to be asking those questions in advance so that we can be courageous and godly men. Now, for more on that, listen to the last episode, The Cost of Courage. I don't know what order I'll release these in. That might not be the last episode by the time this comes out, but listen to that episode. That'll give you a lot more. I went into a lot more depth on that one. Now, I want to talk about Joel Webbon and Canon Plus Moscow, Doug Wilson. Doug Wilson, that'd be the correct name to pick here. So, Joel Webbon and NXR Studios just did basically a hit piece on Doug Wilson. And I thought it was pretty shameful. I mean, it was hypocritical and pretty laughable and just Candace level stuff. They went after Doug Wilson. They accused, they very, very snakily did not technically accuse him of anything, but suggested that maybe this could be what's going on, which is a super effeminate, passive-aggressive, Candace Owens style way to slander a brother in Christ. It was pitiful. And it was a whole hour-long episode where they went not only after Doug, but after all sorts of other conservative influencers and attacked them for all sorts of stuff. Implied that they were being controlled opposition, that they were being controlled by Israel, that they were being controlled by foreign interests, etc. And like I said, it was very kind of confidence game, just asking questions, just noticing Candace Owens style stuff. So I was not impressed at all. I thought it was pretty shameful and hilariously hypocritical because for a long time the NXR has taken the role of the beleaguered, noble, persecuted ones. They're the ones that all the conservative Reformed Christians persecute and condemn and criticize, and they're just trying to speak the truth, but the mean old guard conservatives, the gatekeepers, the Doug Wilsons, they persecute anybody to the right of them. They pick the fights. It's not the NXR picking the fights. They always just wanted peace. They always just wanted to be friends. but everybody else changed, and they've all turned on us, and we're the only ones who are speaking the truth. And we are, to quote Joel Webbon, I'm the best you got. So, that was very hypocritical to go from that kind of background, complaining about being persecuted by the Reformed Christian community, to then do a straight-up hit piece on Doug Wilson, where you are repeating lines that are straight out of right-wing watch. You're pulling out old dirty laundry that the left has been trying to rub in Cannon's face for years. So the irony is palpable. It's just brazen that you're actually using right-wing watch's talking points to attack Doug Wilson. Hard to believe. Just amazing. In addition to that, we then have the issue of the whole they all changed. Everybody else changed. We haven't changed. Why is everybody turning on us? It must be the Jews. It must be the Jews behind closed doors turning everybody against us. But that's also laughable. It's a hilarious claim. The examples that they gave of Doug Wilson having changed. We knew Doug. Doug was great for a long time, and then Doug changed. What happened? Why did Doug change? And then he turned against us. The examples they gave were laughable. And they weren't even necessarily things that I agree with Doug Wilson on. I didn't like how he said some of those things. I would argue with him over some of those things. But to say that those quote-unquote receipts proved that he has somehow completely changed his views was laughable. And the least reason that it was laughable was certainly not the least of which reason was, however you want, I'm butchering that phrase. One of the most obvious reasons why that is so laughable is because I would be one of the ones that quote-unquote turned on the NXR guys. But here's the thing. I didn't turn on them because I got a fat paycheck from Bibi Netanyahu. I didn't even get a thin paycheck from Bibi Netanyahu. I know why I turned on the NXR guys. And I say turned on them. I didn't turn on them. I'm speaking what I believe to be true into what they are saying. I agreed with them for a very long time. I was a fan of them. I was cheering them on. I was watching them thinking, man, these guys are so edifying. I'm loving their podcasts. That, Brian Sylvain and Ogden and Joel Webbon and, well, not Joel, honestly, I didn't run into Joel Webbon until well into my acquaintance with the Ogden community. But I was a huge fan of the Ogden community. And then I've talked about my introduction to Joel Webbon before, so I'm not going to go through all that right now. But point being, I agree with them on so much of what they say, and so I know from personal experience exactly why somebody like me, who is extremely patriarchal, who is very America first, who is not particularly pro-Israel, who is in fact anti a lot of the things that a lot of Israel's involvement in American politics, the dispensationalism, Zionism, I'm against all of that stuff. I mean, I know Zionism is a fraught term. I believe Israel exists as a country now, and they have the right to defend themselves as a country. But I don't think America should be their errand boy, or sending them all sorts of money, or fighting their wars for them. I'm pretty, for being a conservative, I'm pretty anti-Israel. And I'm very patriarchal and all this different stuff. I know exactly why I turn on these guys. If, quote unquote, I'm not saying that I actually did turn on these guys. I would say they changed. Quite obviously, they changed. They are now something that they were not a couple of years ago. This clip is being circulated of Joel Webbon talking about, just from a few years back, talking about what he would do is if his daughter came home with a black man who, she wanted to marry a black man. And Joel Webbon talking about, he'd be like, if this black man loves Jesus, then hey, praise God, marry him. And now Joel Webbon is talking about how interracial marriage is not a sin, it shouldn't be illegal, but it is not ideal. we have your own track record, Joel. We didn't change. You changed. I will admit there are areas that I have changed. Most of the areas that I have changed are that I have become more patriarchal. I have become more skeptical of Israel's involvement in American politics. I've become more, quote, right-wing. I've become more, quote, Christian nationalist. So, if you want to accuse me of changing, I will readily admit that I have continued to, I would say, grow in and flesh out things that I've believed for a long time. But I'm not afraid to acknowledge that there have been things that I've changed and course-corrected and learned and so on, and a lot of them have been changing more towards the right. So to say that somebody like me has changed, and that's why I have turned on the NXR, it's exactly the opposite of what has happened. The NXR, they are the ones who have changed, and to throw a fit and complain that people don't like what you're doing now that you insist on being transgressive, you insist on not giving clarity and definition and biblical boundaries on the things that you're discussing, is pretty gross, and it's rather effeminate and just kind of whiny. Like, if you're gonna be a transgressive edgelord, then just own it. But don't complain about how everybody else has changed. No, you've changed, and you should know that. It's pretty obvious to anybody who's watching. So just own it. Just say, yeah, we've changed, and you cannot fault people for believing that they should defend both flanks at the same time. So by the time you are so far to the right that a lot of your followers think Hitler was a great guy, you shouldn't be surprised that some people who used to cheer you on are now saying, whoa, I can't go there. I can't agree with that. I'm going to have to distance myself from you guys. You cannot fault them for wanting to defend both flanks at the same time. That doesn't mean that they've changed. It just means that they believe in not erring to the right or to the left. So I don't know Moscow's heart. I don't know Doug's heart. Maybe they did get bought off by Israel. I don't know. But your argument really doesn't bear much weight for me when you say that Doug has changed, because you would say the same thing about me, and I know my motives. I know why I did what I did. I know why I have picked fights with the NXR. And it's not because Israel bought me off. But that's a real convenient excuse to be able to insinuate, because it's unfalsifiable. Because anybody who says I haven't received any money from Bibi Netanyahu, well, that's exactly what somebody who received money from Bibi Netanyahu would say. So, it's like, sir, have you stopped beating your wife yet? What's he supposed to say, yes or no? If he says yes, then he's admitting that he used to beat his wife. If he says no, he's admitting that he still beats his wife. Either way, you got him. Because you've precluded the possibility that he actually never beat his wife all the way along. So it's a really, really cheap tactic, and it's just slander. If you don't have receipts, if you don't have proof, you're going to say, well, the FBI visited him once, and then they got popular, and then things changed. Okay, Candace, let me know when you have actual biblically qualified evidence here for what you're saying. That leads to another thing. The accusation against Doug Wilson of being, he's currying favor now that he's become more popular and he's gotten the big seats in the halls of power. He doesn't want to say anything. He doesn't want to be too edgy. Okay, first of all, that's hilarious, because that seems to imply that the mainstream media loves Doug Wilson, when the reality is that they will interview him, but they interview him like a freak show, like he's a monster, and they want to expose him for the misogynistic, racist, homophobic bigot that they want to paint him out to be. So it's funny on its face there, but secondly, it's hilarious coming from Joel Webbon, who will happily do interviews with Nick Fuentes and with who makes overtures to Candace Owens on his Twitter, and who will go on Timcast with Tim Pool. And who would in the past happily went on with, or tried to get on, Ali Beth Stuckey's show, to my understanding. It's pretty hilarious. He does not seem to have any problem getting as large of a platform as he is able to reach. He seems to be all for that. But when Doug does it, it's proof that Doug has been co-opted. I have my doubts that Joel would turn down a CNN interview. I have some serious doubts. So if you're going to say that Doug is clearly compromised because he's started to get some national attention, and you're going to say that without any, your only evidence is that he's gotten some national attention, that honestly just kind of sounds like envy talking. Like, you're going to need to give me more than that to prove that Doug is a compromised bad actor. So, I'm trying to remember what my last point was because there was another one. Oh, yes. So another glaring inconsistency here is the ferocious attack against Doug Wilson from the people who are so focused on the no more brother wars, no enemies to the right. Why can't we all just get along? But yet they will literally talk about Doug Wilson like he is a Judas. They used the Judas example in their podcast. So we'll talk about Doug Wilson like he's a Judas, but Corey Mailer we will treat with kid gloves. Joel Webbon recently tweeted. He tweets to his followers, you know, we can't agree with, this is paraphrased, but we can't agree with Corey Mailer on everything, but we can disagree with him respectfully. And then Joel posts screenshots of his tweets where he's dialoguing with Corey Mailer in an almost pandering level of respectfulness and kindness and gentleness. You know, I wouldn't really have a problem with that if that was a consistent thing for Joel. If that was a consistent MO, if that was how he talked to, I don't know, Doug Wilson or Allie Beth Stuckey. If he would rebuke his followers for the way they ridicule and insult and persecute women on X who disagree with Joel Webbon, if he would rebuke his followers for that, as well as for any sharp words towards Corey Mailer, then I might respect what he had to say. But if you're going to treat Corey Mailer with kid gloves, if you're going to cozy up with Nick Fuentes, if you are going to obviously, implicitly hope that Candace notices you, and yet you're going to treat Allie Beth Stuckey like she is the very embodiment of Jezebel, and you're going to treat Doug Wilson like he is Judas Iscariot in the flesh, I'm sorry, that's inconsistent. It's laughable. I can't take you seriously. And this is coming from me. I'm Captain Dialogue respectfully with people. I'm all for that. But if you think you can treat Corey Mailer with kid gloves while egging your followers on to mock Owen Strahan off Twitter, I'm sorry. I don't take you seriously anymore. That's just silliness. It reeks of posturing. It reeks of currying favor with the edgiest and most transgressive elements of the online right without actually having to fully admit and embrace Hitler and Nazism and white supremacy, because you know that would be very impossible to defend from Scripture and still maintain the Christian pastor act. So, the whole thing was shameful. I was just disgusted, and I consider it somewhat of a mask off moment for the NXR studio guys. And so, now, the plot thickens though, okay? Because after that, Canon's official Twitter account, this is Doug's publishing company, releases a screenshot. They take Joel's NXR Studios template, face of Joel Webbon, and so it looks like it's coming soon from NXR Studios. But they redesign it, and again, I'm paraphrasing, but it says something along the lines of, and if you have small children listening, maybe mute this, because it's pretty crude. So I'm delaying, I'm stalling in case you have small children listening. Have them not listen or mute for the next 30 seconds and then come back, okay? It says something along the lines of the vagina dialogues with, coming soon from NXR Studios with Joel Webbon. An intimate experience with Joel Webbon. I'm sorry. What? What? So, just as NXR decides to burn its credibility to the ground with a hit piece on Doug Wilson, Canon Press, not to be outdone, stoops to the bottom of it's a race to the bottom. Like, Joe Webbon's crew is like, hey guys, we're gonna do a Candace Owens. We're gonna make it quite obvious that we should not be taken seriously. Watch this. And they wad up their credibility, whatever they had left, and they set it on fire. And then Canon is like, oh yeah, and they stuff their credibility in a bazooka and launch it at a nearby building. What in the world? What sort of returning evil for evil nonsense is this? So, lest anybody think that I'm going after Joel Webbon because I am a Moscow loyalist, I have no loyalties to Moscow. My general rule is I don't have loyalties to anybody online. As far as I'm concerned, my loyalties are first to Christ, and then it's to my family and my local community. And there are a few people online that I have interacted with personally for a long enough period of time that I would actually say, yeah, I've got some level of loyalty or trust built up with them. But my general rule is I don't trust anybody online. I'm not loyal to anybody online. I'm certainly not beholden to anybody online. So what I say about NXR, I'm saying because I believe it's true, not because I'm trying to defend Moscow. Especially when they do something as egregiously, disgustingly indefensible as return evil for evil like that. That was just, I don't have words for how remarkably just childish and dumb and gross. As you can hear, I'm speechless. And so, yeah, I have no defense for what Moscow said in response. I think it's indefensible. I think it's disgusting. And I think while NXR just did everything they could to make Moscow look good, Moscow just responded by doing everything they could to make the NXR look good. And the result is egg on both sides of the fence, on both their faces. They are wrestling in the mud. They're both getting dirty. And it's a sad day for the name of Christ. That's not how Christians should behave. So, I would say it's another strike against NXR in a long series of strikes. And everything they say should be taken with very large grains of salt at this point. Even though I agree with so much of the things that they say on a technical level, their trajectory, what they're saying, what they're doing is really, I would say, I'm searching for what's the biblical terminology to use here. Their fruits should cause us to question the tree. Big time. And that goes for the entire NXR movement. While I agree with so much of the patriarchy and the America First and we shouldn't be loyal to Israel and we shouldn't be dispensationalists and we should be Christian nationalists. I agree with all of that. With so many of those things. So many of the things that they're saying. But there is a consistent fruit pattern that I would say has demonstrated a deep untrustworthiness when it comes to the tree. And Christians should be using extreme discernment in listening to what those guys are putting out. And really just, I wouldn't recommend listening to it in large doses because of the bad company corrupts good morals. And the fruit consistently is trending further and further away from responsible and wise biblical truth and more towards edgy and indefensible stuff. But with that being said, I'm really disappointed in how Moscow is handling it as well. And there's just there's some blame and some shame to go all around here at this point. Anyway, so there's my take on the current meltdown between Ogden, or well, not Ogden, Webbon and Wilson. And that's all that I have time for now. So until next time, make sure you check out my music on iTunes or Spotify. Go to my website, GabrielHuddleston.com. Read the short story, Brother, which I just recently published. It's a short story that has a lot of different things baked into it that are very current pressing issues, but it is actually a story. It's short narrative that I think you'll enjoy. So go to GabrielHuddleston.com to read that. Follow me on X at Gabriel Huddleston. And until next time, I'm Gabriel Huddleston, and this is Where the Battle Runs Thick.